I am Alan Walker of Udder, and I'm here at IHR Manchester. And I'm speaking to the great and the good of the recruitment industry, meeting people who are trying to make a difference and change how recruitment works, its efficiencies, productivity, etc. And people who are just generally doing good stuff for the recruitment world. I'm delighted to have with me Marcell from Adidas. Marcell, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you very much for having me.
So for those that haven't met you before, might not know who you are, can you do a quick intro to you, your role, and probably don't need to say too much about Adidas because people know who Adidas are, but what do you do there?
Of course, yeah. So my name is Marcell Edwards. I sit in the global talent acquisition team. I sit in the UK, but I am working truly global, mainly a lot of roles across Europe and stuff. I also get a lot involved in a lot of the D&I within Adidas, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a real strong passion of mine. And I also sit on the board of directors at a charity called the Together Trust, which I'm now the chairman of their ED&I governance, which is really cool.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Really interesting.
So why are you here today?
Number of reasons, not just for chatting to people, because that's what I love to do, as you probably can tell, but you learn a lot from these events. You learn from your peers, you learn about what's happening in the industry, keep up to speed, especially in this ever-changing world.
Yeah.
And there's lots of technology out there right now that I've never been exposed to, that I'd love to be exposed to and love to incorporate into whatever business facet I can bring it in.
And are you looking forward to seeing any particular speakers?
Yeah, there's a few. There's Loti that's on this afternoon, so he's talking through his diversity journey around racism and me. That's a really good speaker. Adway, those guys are wild, but they have a really, really cool piece of technology.
Absolutely.
And obviously I want to speak to a couple of stands as well, like my interview, the Real Links team as well. They're really cool as well with the referral jams. I really love that stuff. And then Laps. From a diversity angle, Laps are really good as well.
Interesting. Those first three, my interview, Real Links and Adway, are all good friends of mine.
So, oh, really?
Yeah, I know them all well. You're talking to the right people.
Yeah, I know they're good guys.
So DE&I is obviously a passion of yours. It's something you're actively working in, both within Adidas, but also within the charity sector.
Yeah.
Why are you so passionate about it first?
I think probably my background in terms of growing up, coming from a underprivileged background and working so hard, going through certain challenges myself and overcoming those to get to where I am now. I think now I realise that through my hard work and dedication, I'm in a relatively privileged position and I can give a lot back. I've got a lot of experience, and for me, working in talent acquisition, it's not like some areas where you're just doing things for a number or doing things for monetary gain or anything like that. You are actually helping people, changing lives, and to couple that with actually creating experiences that matter, that are unique for lots of different individuals. That's what I strive to do, and that's why I've become so passionate about it over the years.
Is there a particular kind of strand of diversity that gets you excited? Because the example you gave of your personal life there, you actually led with kind of the social mobility rather than race, for example. Which people might assume that was where you'd go.
100%.
But you went with social mobility, which is a passion of mine. I was really pleased that you went down that route. I thought, great. Because I think if you fix social mobility issues, you fix a ton of other diversity issues anyway.
Absolutely. And I think when people look at me on the surface, they always think, right, if it's going to talk diversity, equity, inclusion, it's going to be race.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm very conscious of that. But what I've done through mentors and
which in itself is a bit of discrimination. It's
assuming, isn't it? Yeah, it is. But it's fine. But I get it.
Yeah.
But through my mentorships with people like Asif and stuff who's at Warner Media, I've learned so much that so many other dimensions equally are just as important. And through some of the work I'm doing around like social mobility, for example, you can affect so many different changes. And people always ask me about diversity and they say, what's the hardest thing to accomplish? Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot. Education is so paramount, so important. But again, you can only control what you can control, right? So for me, in my opinion, you can control your friends and family.
Yeah.
Right? So you can choose who you want in your life from a friend's point of view,
your
family to a degree sometimes.
Less so,
and, you can educate your partner, your children, all that kind of things. And, the older generation potentially within your family that you maybe different opinion views, you can change them slightly. And then you can change your work, right? So you can change your work. So you can influence where you work, the colleagues around you, try and educate them and try and shape those two spheres. And those two combined, they kind of interlink, because if you're changing the home life and then you're changing work then changes society. Yeah. So that person at the end of the street that's, no, we don't want this, we don't want that, there's no point shouting at them because they're just going to be doing great. But if their work colleagues are then talking and saying, actually, we're going to do a training course on this, that then is affecting them. So eventually it all comes around full circle.
Exactly. The biggest issue I've always found in diversity is ignorance to a certain degree.
Yes.
Lack of understanding, and lack of being able to put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly.
So if you've got somebody who comes from a very privileged background and all of their friends are privileged and their work colleagues are privileged and every social network that they knock around in are also similar to them, they've got no idea what it's like for somebody who's born on a council estate and has had to kind of grow up through those ranks, not had much money. Instead of wearing Adidas and Converse, they're probably wearing Gola, kind of thing. You know what I mean? They just haven't exposed themselves to that, and it's not through it's not always through lack of wanting to. It's just not having the opportunity. Yeah. So as you say, DE&I is much as about education and exposure.
Yeah, on both spectrums as well, because you've got the privilege that having those views, and then you've got the underrepresented community that are less privileged, but they can also have opposing views.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have like educational strands that meet multiple personalities, multiple dimensions, and the biggest thing is listening, hearing. You know, because you can't force your opinions on people.
No,
you have to influence and shape and try and help as best you can.
Well, what does that look like at Adidas then?
Adidas. So at our company, we've got multiple educational series. We have a diversity and equity team, which is incredible. So they put out a lot of content around, you know, what it means across like Mental Health Awareness Week, for example, which is this week.
Yeah.
They do stuff around like Black History Month around the organisation, and they have a strategic direction that's linked in with our HR people strategy. So everything that we do, not just from a HR perspective or a talent perspective, is also ingrained within our core values as an organisation. So even our sales teams are working towards the same directions and KPIs that we're looking towards. So they do quite a lot. And again, it's an evolving journey. There's no one-stop end to the project. You know, diversity, equity, inclusion is consistently going, consistently evolving. We take 2020 as an example of that. You know, that multitude and, you know, expanded a lot of it. But I think one thing that is good with Adidas is that it's authentic. You know, you get a lot of companies potentially out there that are trying to just box tick or create kind of false D&I metrics, or you know what I mean. But I think with us, and
you need to put a rainbow flag on your LinkedIn profile once a year, and you're right, aren't you? That's D&I done, isn't it?
There's some, yeah, exactly. But the worst thing within an organization, like what we do, like not necessarily Adidas, but we as TA professionals, you do that on the surface. You bring that dimension in, and they're like,
this isn't real life.
Yeah. So you just spend all that money recruiting that person, and then they leave after 2 weeks, and then you're back at square one, right?
Do you think initiatives like that you're part of at Adidas are easier to get through in an organisation like Adidas because they're, to a certain degree, it's linked to sport, obviously, and at least the playing field in sport is, you know, it doesn't matter what colour creed you are. If you're the best sports person, you're on the field. Yeah. You get picked. Not quite the same at management level, maybe, and coaching and ownership. But you know, the people who are buying sportswear are often into sport and interested in sport, and they're by nature diverse. The customer base is diverse. Is that easier to reflect in Adidas, do you think?
One thing with Adidas, I can't necessarily speak on behalf of the brand, but in terms of big brands like Adidas, Google's, like etc., they have such a strong consumer base, right? That know or feel that they know what that brand identity is. I think that pulls a lot of people in. I think the biggest challenge in them is using that brand identity to reflect it internally. Right, so if you are showcasing talents in the sporting arena that are multitudes of dimensions of diversity, you have to reflect that internally. Yeah. Because if that consumer candidate is seeing that on a brand campaign, they then have to, when they join, see that in the workplace. Yes. Or at least if they come in from a certain dimension, feel that they're comfortable enough in that workplace to be their true self. Because if they turn up to the workplace and they're trying to be something else, they're never going to fit in, and then they're going to leave the organisation as a candidate, an employee, potentially as a consumer. So
it's about being able to bring their kind of, I hear the phrase, bring their whole self to work, so they can be who they are, rather than pretending to be somebody they aren't.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of global brands, you know, around the world trying to create those inner working environments that are now a lot more, not just sustainable, but inclusive as well.
So for those organisations that might on the kind of outside not be seen as diverse because their workforce isn't, but maybe they feel like they are inclusive, you know, they want to be inclusive at least, even if they're not yet. What are kind of some of the steps they can take to be better at that stuff? Because it's really hard if you're a population of 90% white people, 70% men, and they're all over the age of 40, but you actually maybe genuinely at the leadership level have a desire to be a more inclusive, diverse organisation. How do you take those steps?
Multiple ways. Data is key. Data in everything is always king, right? So figuring out a way of how you can bring data into your organization, but that's surveys, when that's listening surveys to the people, find out what your workforce is made up of. First and foremost. So what's your base? What's the dimension of the organization? Then understanding what they need, what the needs are. What is it that your organization needs to deliver for your employees? There's no point getting a survey result of 20% participation rate, for example, and saying, okay, on that participation rate, we've identified that we need to sort out gender. Because that's 20%, there's 8% out there that haven't even responded.
Yeah,
and it could be something, it could be something completely different. Similarly, if you get a data set that comes through, and specifically those organizations that you described, if it's calling out that we need diversity within disabilities, age, gender, race, for example, let's just say age and disability are the top two that are calling out that there's lots of discrimination happening. You don't need a senior leader in an organization saying, well, actually, I think it should be some LGBTQ plus. I think we should create a network around LGBTQ plus because that's what's going on outside. That's what's the main topic is. Because then that's somebody's perception or personal opinion against the data. Yeah. The data's telling you what you need. So it's understanding what your organization needs, listening, not being afraid to listen and hear what your employees say, because sometimes it can be uncomfortable. Yeah. And then creating action. So getting that data in, creating a long-term objective strategic plan to start creating those actions that matter for the organization. I think it sounds like a lot for some organizations, but honestly, it really isn't.
No, it's not insane, is it? No, exactly. I always see that one of the mistakes people used to make when I was operating in that world a little bit more than I am now was that they'd set themselves some realistic targets, or even going down the road to quotas and things. It's kind of scary land. Yeah. But they'd say, for example, if they were a technology business and they're hiring developers, they look at their developer team and it's 9 men to every 1 woman. Yeah. They're like, well, that's not great. We want to go for 50-50. Yes. What they don't or didn't do then, maybe they're better at it nowadays, is actually look at the addressable talent market. If the wider market is 7 blokes to every 1 woman in terms of developers, you're never going to achieve 50-50. Exactly. Or if you do, somebody else is going to be even worse off. I think that realism is important, isn't it? 100%. Especially when you get into things like targets and quotas, and maybe you shouldn't even have them at all.
Well, again, and it's going into that is a tricky situation, right? It varies by countries and all sorts. But the point that you made there is absolutely right. And I think some organisations and companies need to realise that if you do have that imbalance, that you can try and put measures in place to try and address that imbalance. Yeah. Balance shortlisting, blind CV, and whatever it is. I've even heard of the Rooney Rule, for example, which I'm not a fan of.
It's an American coaching thing, isn't it, in the NFL, I think.
Basically.
So 3 interviewees, 1 has to be black.
Or something along that. But what if it's an underrepresented dimension, for example? Right, they get accelerated straight to the final stage.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And again, tokenism. All that.
So even if they're completely not right for the role.
Exactly, right. But again, to the point of, let's say, it's 7-1 male versus a female, right? Yeah. Doesn't mean that hiring manager should be compelled to hire the female over the 7 males. It should always come down to what does your business need? Yeah. Who's the most qualified candidate? And if the female wasn't the strongest, think about, okay, well, what development plans do we have in place to get that person to the right level? Would that actually work? Would it work for our business? Or would we just hire that just because they're ticking a box?
Just for the sake of it,
reverse it. If it's 7-1 in the industry and you've got that market data, what can you do as an organisation to try and change that? Apprenticeships, bursaries, change the foundation, go to those underrepresented communities and say, hey, we're looking for these kind of talents, come and join our organisation at the entry point and we'll upskill you and develop you. And then you've got loyalty. So you're creating advocates then at a very junior level that'll travel through your organisation.
But you can't magically suddenly make half the developer population female, can you?
No,
you've got to do stuff at school level and STEM education, etc., to affect that change. Of course. And I always, again, sorry, I'm doing more talking than I should be, but I'm passionate about this.
Yes.
So we always sort of say, look, what you should be doing is make sure that every step of your process, you are giving yourself every opportunity to hire diverse talent. You still pick the best person.
Absolutely.
So make sure your attraction methods are themselves diverse and inclusive, and you don't just go in a couple of small ponds, you cast the net wide and far and bring your organisation to life. Your selection methods, again, they're not discriminatory or unfair or
language you use,
give advantage to other people. And then your final decision will still be the right one.
100%.
You've done everything up to that 100%. Point. Your managers are trained properly. They know how to interview fairly, but you still go to whoever the best person is, don't you?
100%. And I've heard, well, what if the underrepresented person is better or equal to the privileged person in some degrees? It's like, well, then that's where you've got another decision to make, right? And you can go another step further in the interview process to try and simulate kind of skills or whatever. Or you can actually say, well, in this process, we've got 2 candidates that are very similar, very the same, but we know we have a diversity challenge within this particular dimension. we're going to go in this case.
Exactly. That's
I
fine.
think that's fair, in my opinion.
I do as well.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's fair and totally core, isn't it?
100%. Or then putting somebody through another interview, or trying to catch somebody out so that one person wins. It gets messy that way.
Exactly. Listen, okay. Who else are you hoping to catch up with today then after this interview?
A few. There's a few different companies out there. Like I want to see the big ones. So if there's like Total Jobs and stuff like that, I want to see some of the big jobs. So I want to understand how they're navigating this new world, you know, with social media recruiting, and apparently, like I know that job board like adverts are going through the roof, but applications are coming through, you know, lower.
Going through the floor.
So I want to see, exactly. So I want to see what those guys are doing. And then I was on the call this morning, or the meeting this morning with Broadbean on data-driven decisions. Because I'm very passionate about data.
Guy. Yeah.
Well, not technically. If you know me, I'm not technically data, but as I've kind of evolved my career, I've realised the importance of data. It's so useful.
Absolutely.
And it's just when you have limited technologies to use data, it's like how can I navigate around that myself? So really interested in talking to those as well.
Excellent. Listen, Marcell, it's been amazing meeting you, mate. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Cheers.